Right now in Washington, the Senate is voting on federal legislation to protect voting rights. That vote is expected to fail because in the Senate it will need 60 votes to pass a Republican-led filibuster. Once again, filibuster is not in the Constitution's tradition of the Senate, the rule of the Senate. All 50 Republicans are expected to vote against this voting rights bill. So joining us now on this very busy day in Washington, ABC News congressional correspondent Rachel Scott and our political director, Rick Klein. Rachel, let me first ask you about the pressure on the Democratic side on Senators Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona, two moderate Democrats. They often go their own way. Democrats need every single vote here just to get to 50, and then the vice president for 51. Maybe President Biden has been leaning on them to do away with the filibuster, so Democrats can go to line. Actually, President Biden has not been in that. What is the status of the Democrats deciding this old rule, this filibuster, it's got to go?
Well, I can tell you that for those two moderate senators, Sinema and Manchin, it's just not an option to change the Senate rules to eliminate the filibuster, even to try and do a carve-out, which would allow Democrats, if they are united on this front, to just move forward and pass voting rights legislation, sort of making this one-time rule. Every so often, we ask Senator Joe Manchin about this, and the last time that I asked him, he said, "I do not feel like destroying our democracy." So that kind of speaks for itself there. But it does really send a message to Democrats about what options they potentially have left. Listen, it's been 99 days since the president stood in the birthplace of democracy and declared the Republican opposition to voting rights legislation one of the biggest threats. But there's still no progress. No Republicans are coming around to supporting this. And they have changed and amended this bill to try and draw in some Republicans, trying to create a national standard for voter ID laws. This piece of legislation would also create Election Day as a federal holiday, create a national standard also for voting across the country. But Republicans are just firm against this, Republican leadership united. And so Democrats are going to have to try and find another alternative. But carving out the filibuster is just not one of them for those moderates.
All right, well, that will end for now the discussion on this critical issue, with the Republicans going the other way and state by state in the name of what they call voter election security. So on another subject today, President Biden on his way to Scranton, Pennsylvania, his hometown, to push for his ambitious domestic spending plans, now bogged down amidst infighting among Democrats in Congress. So, Rachel, Democratic senators came out of those meetings with the president with some sense of urgency. Maybe progressives ready to make some concessions to bring the price tag down, potentially big cuts to family leave, tuition-free community college. So what else is getting pared back, and do you think this is going to get across the finish line?
Right, so the total number is going to be pared back. Progressives initially wanted $6 trillion for this human infrastructure package. They came down to 3.5. Now it's hovering just under $2 trillion. That's pretty much half of what, they originally wanted for this proposal. Tuition-free community college. I was told that the president told House progressives in that meeting yesterday that that is on the chopping block, likely will not be included. That's a pretty big setback for Democrats, something that even the First Lady, Jill Biden, who is an educator, has touted. That is important to her as well. That likely will have to go. The $300 a month child tax credit, another Democratic priority. The president acknowledging that that might only be able to go forward for another year. And then also paid family leave. There's talks about reducing that from 12 weeks down to 4 weeks. That's a pretty hard line for some progressives, like Representative Jayapal. She wants the full 12 weeks in there. And so now is this messy sausage-making process where you have moderates and progressives going back and forth. The president wants to reach a deal, obviously, before he goes off to this foreign trip. But I had a chance to catch up with Representative Richie Torres today, who told me that he believes that a one-year extension on the child tax credit just is not enough. Take a listen.
As far as I'm concerned, a one-year expansion is a death sentence for the child tax credit. Because if Republicans assume control in 2022, the child tax credit will be left to expire. Tens of millions of children will be left to languish in poverty, and our greatest triumph of racial equity will be left undone. So I see it as a grave miscalculation.
So a few things on Democrats' minds right now. One, of course, is the midterm elections. They want something to be able to tout. They want to pass President Biden's domestic agenda. They want to hang on to the House and the Senate, of course, but also on their minds, as President Biden mentioned to them directly in the meeting yesterday, his upcoming foreign trip. That is where he's going to be focused on climate change. And climate change provisions are the biggest sticking point right now in getting this reconciliation package across the finish line over in the Senate. And so they're thinking about that as well. They're also up against a pretty harsh deadline on the 31st when transportation funding is going to run out. And so now there's this all of a sudden scramble to try and reconcile, try to bring progressives and moderates back to the table to try and get them on the same page. I just asked Vice President Kamala Harris, who's obviously here presiding over that key vote. She told me that she's optimistic. She believes that they will get the deal done.
Like herding cats, herding Democrats out there. Rachel Scott on Capitol Hill. Thanks very much for that. You've got to go back into the Capitol building there. Thanks a lot. Well, let's bring in our political director, Rick Klein. Rick, on another question, looking ahead on the voting rights issue that Rachel was talking about, looking ahead to the 2022 midterms. So now we're looking at the Republicans changing law in state after state, the Democrats failing at this point, it looks like maybe for good, in getting some national standards on how people vote in this country. So who gets the advantage in the midterms? Are you looking at states and saying, okay, well, now the way they've changed the law, it's going to be really hard for Democrats here?
Yeah, there's a lot of different moving pieces here, Terry, and it matters. It changes state by state. But by and large, if you look at the 15-plus states that have made changes, it's likely to disproportionately impact voters of color, elderly voters, poorer voters, voters, in short, who are more likely to be Democrats, including many in urban areas who've relied on some of the changes in the number of places you can use drop boxes or mailing in ballots. There are tighter voter ID restrictions, which, again, disproportionately impact lower-income people. And I think the changes are going to matter the most in some of the states that are politically the most important. There's no surprise there, but Georgia, Texas, two of the big battlegrounds that have critical races next year, they're going to have dramatically different voting laws that are going to impact people across the state, and particularly in places where there were large expansions in how you vote due to the pandemic, as well as long-term changes in liberalizing those laws. That's getting rolled back, and it's getting rolled back significantly in some places, less so in others. And now this effort in Congress appears to have stalled. This would appear to be the end of the road, at least for this year, Terry, in terms of trying to federalize some of the standards to prevent these, what Democrats view as an outright effort to block their voters from voting.
So, Rick, you know, both of you and Terry talking about this sense of urgency here among Democrats. Why the need for this Halloween deadline? A little scary. Had to say it. Had to go there.
It is, and it's not because they want to go. It's not because they want candy. It's not because of trick or treating. What it is that Congress only works well when there are deadlines. That's the fact that unless you've got something looming, in this case, it's the expiration of a surface transportation bill that Rachel just mentioned that has to be dealt with in some form or fashion. The other reason that they set this deadline is because there's two other far more serious deadlines looming in December. All of government funding runs out, and the debt ceiling has only been extended through about the middle of December. So if you look at those two issues, you realize that Democrats are going to have a lot on their plate going into the late fall and early winter. The idea was, let's create the urgency on the Democratic side. Speaker Pelosi said the 31st is our deadline. And that foreign trip has also been mentioned quite a bit, because the main focus that President Biden is bringing abroad to his trip to Europe is climate change. He'll be at a summit that is very high profile in that regard. And he has talked about this as being an example that the United States needs to bring to that summit to have the full force and weight of the government to be able to say that the government is capable of big action.
All right, our political director, Rick Klein, thank you so much. And, of course, Rachel had to jump back in for that vote as that voting rights push continues inside the Capitol.
Absolutely.
She's running in and out for us.
She is the Energizer Bunny up there. She really is.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.